everybody, happy Thursday. It is time to start reading chapters 13 and 14 of James and the Giant Peach. It's moving very quickly, but it's starting to get super interesting. So the last time we were together for chapters 11 and 12, James had already gone into the peach and found that secret door in the middle of the peach. He went inside and he was greeted by a bunch of new characters that we were introduced to. We met Ladybug, we met the green grasshopper, we met Earthworm, we met the centipede, we met Spider and the silkworm. And at the very beginning, I think James thought that he was in a lot of trouble. They were going to eat him, but we soon learned that they were friendly. They thought that he was one of them, and they kind of welcomed him in and joked around with him a little bit. So where we left off on chapter 12 is they were actually going to go to sleep for the night inside the peach. They were all kind of the same size. All of these insects intook somehow those magic green little things, and they grew bigger, the same size of James. So they're all kind of the same size, and they were about to go to bed, and they asked Spider to kind of make the beds for them. So we're going to have to see how she does that, what she's going to do. The two things I'm going to ask you today is first is the vocabulary word, and the word that I would like you to try and figure out or define is the word marvelous. What do you think the word marvelous means? And the question that I'm going to ask you to answer in a complete sentence by restating the question is, in the morning, what happened to the peach and who made this happen? So in the morning, what happened to the peach and who made this happen? If you're answering it with a complete sentence, you're going to say, in the morning, what happened to the peach was, or in the morning, blank, blank, blank happened to the peach. So I'm looking forward to seeing those answers. Remember, if you answer those questions, you will get a tally mark on the sheet, and whoever has the most tally marks at the end of next week will get a letter sent home from me. So we're going to start with chapters 13 and 14. We ended with this picture of Spider. She's an interesting looking character, and they asked her to make the bed. So let's see how this is going to go. A few minutes later, Miss Spider had made the first bed. It was hanging from the ceiling, suspended by a rope of threads at either end, so that actually it looked more like a hammock than a bed. But it was a magnificent affair, and the stuff that it was made of shimmered like silk in the pale light. I'm actually going to read those sentences again because it already has our vocabulary word in it. A few minutes later, Miss Spider had made the first bed. It was hanging from the ceiling, suspended by a rope of threads at either end, so that it actually looked more like a hammock than a bed. But it was a magnificent affair, and the stuff that it was made of shimmered like silk in the pale light. I do hope you'll find it comfortable, Miss Spider said to the old green grasshopper. I made it as soft and silky as I possibly could. I spun it with gossamer. That's a much better quality thread than one I use for my own web. Thank you so much, my dear lady, the old green grasshopper said, climbing into the hammock. Ah, this is just what I needed. Good night, everybody. Good night. Then Miss Spider spun the next hammock, and the ladybug got in. After that, she spun a long one for the centipede and an even longer one for the earthworm. And how do you like your bed, she said to James when it came to his turn, hard or soft? I like it soft. Thank you very much, James answered. For goodness sake, stop staring around the room and get on with my boots, the centipede said. You and I are never going to get any sleep at this rate, and kindly line them up neatly in pairs as you take them off. Don't just throw them over your shoulder. James worked away frantically on the centipede's boots. Each one had laces that had to be untied and loosened before it could be pulled off, and to make matters worse, all the laces were tied up in the most complicated knots that had to be unpicked with fingernails. It was just awful. It took about 2 hours, and by the time James had pulled off the last boot of all and had lined them up in a row on the floor, 21 pairs altogether, the centipede was fast asleep. Wake up, centipede, whispered James, giving him a gentle nudge in the stomach. It's time for bed. Thank you, my dear child, the centipede said, opening his eyes. Then he got down off the sofa and ambled across the room and crawled into his hammock. James got into his own hammock, and oh, how soft and comfortable it was compared with the hard bare boards that his aunts had always made him sleep upon at home. Lights out, said the centipede drowsily. Nothing happened. Turn out the light, he called, raising his voice. James glanced around the room, wondering which of the others he might be talking to, but they were all asleep. The old green grasshopper was snoring loudly through his nose. The ladybug was making whistling noises as she breathed, and the earthworm was coiled up like a spring at one end of his hammock, wheezing and blowing through his open mouth. As for Miss Spider, she had made a lovely web for herself across the corner of the room, and James could see her crouching right in the very center of it, mumbling softly in her dreams. "I said turn off the light," shouted the centipede angrily. "Are you talking to me?" James asked him. "Of course I'm not talking to you," the centipede answered. "That crazy glowworm has gone to sleep with her light on." For the first time since entering the room, James glanced up at the ceiling, and there he saw a most extraordinary sight, something that looked like a gigantic fly without wings. It was at least 3 feet long. It was standing upside down upon its 6 legs in the middle of the ceiling, and the tail end of this creature seemed to be literally on fire. A brilliant greenish light, as bright as the brightest electric bulb, was shining out of its tail and lighting up the whole room. "Is that a glowworm?" asked James, staring at the light. "It doesn't look like a worm of any sort to me." "Of course it's a glowworm," the centipede answered. "At least that's what she calls herself. Although, actually, you are quite right. She isn't really a worm at all. Glowworms are never worms. They're simply lady fireflies without wings. Wake up, you lazy beast." But the glowworm didn't stir, so the centipede reached out of his hammock and picked up one of his boots from the floor. "Put out that wretched light," he shouted, hurling the boot up at the ceiling. The glowworm slowly opened one eye and stared at the centipede. "There is no need to be rude," she said coldly. "All in good time." "Come on, come on, come on," shouted the centipede, "or I'll put it out for you." So up top we have a picture of the glowworm, and here we have James and the centipede at the bottom. "Oh, hello, James," the glowworm said, looking down and giving James a little wave and a smile. "I didn't see you come in. Welcome, my dear boy. Welcome and good night." Then, click, and out went the light. James Henry Trotter lay there in the darkness with his eyes wide open, listening to the strange sleeping noises that the creatures were making all around him, and wondering what on earth was going to happen to him in the morning. Already he was beginning to like his new friends very much. They were not nearly as terrible as they looked. In fact, they weren't really terrible at all. They seemed extremely kind and helpful in spite of all the shouting and arguing that went on between them. "Good night, old green grasshopper," he whispered. "Good night, ladybug. Good night, Miss Spider." But before he could go through them all, he had fallen fast asleep. That is the end of chapter 13. I want you to think a second to yourself, how might you feel if you were James right now? Inside of a giant peach, talking to insects that were your size, sleeping in a hammock that a spider made for you. That might be a really big difference from what your everyday life looked like, even if you weren't James. All right, chapter 14. "We're off," someone was shouting. "We're off at last." James woke up with a jump and looked about him. The creatures were all out of their hammocks and moving excitedly around the room. Suddenly, the floor gave a great heave, as though an earthquake were taking place. "Here we go," shouted the old green grasshopper, hopping up and down with excitement. "Hold on tight." "What's happening?" cried James, leaping out of his hammock. "What's going on?" The ladybug, who was obviously a kind and gentle creature, came over and stood beside him. "In case you don't know it," she said, "we are about to depart forever from the top of this ghastly hill that we've all been living on for so long. We are about to roll away inside this great big beautiful peach to a land of what?" asked James. "Never you mind," said the ladybug. "But nothing could be worse than this desolate hilltop and those 2 repulsive aunts of yours." Here's the ladybug. "Hear, hear," they all shouted. "Hear, hear." You may not have noticed it," the ladybug went on, "but the whole garden, even before it reaches the steep edge of the hill, happens to be on a steep slope. And therefore, the only thing that has been stopping this peach from rolling away right from the beginning is the thick stem attached to the tree. Break the stem, and off we go. Watch it, cried Miss Spider, as the room gave another violent launch. Here we go. Not quite, not quite. At this moment, continued the ladybug, our centipede, who has a pair of jaws as sharp as razors, is up there on top of the peach, nibbling away at the stem. In fact, he must be nearly through it. As you can well from the way we're lurching about. Would you like me to take you under my wings so that you won't fall over when we're starting to roll? That's very kind of you, said James, but I think I'll be all right. Just then, the centipede stuck his grinning face through a hole in the ceiling and shouted, I've done it! We're off! We're off, the others cried. We're off! The journey begins, shouted the centipede. And who knows where it will end, muttered the earthworm. If you have anything to do with it, it can only mean trouble. Nonsense, said the ladybug. We are now about to visit the most marvelous places and see the most wonderful things. Isn't that so, centipede? I'm going to reread that paragraph again because it also has our vocabulary word in it. Nonsense, said the ladybug. We are now about to visit the most marvelous places and see the most wonderful things. Isn't that so, centipede? There is no knowing what we shall see, cried the centipede. We may see a creature with 49 heads who lives in the desolate snow, and whenever he catches a cold, which he dreads, he has 49 noses to blow. We may see the venomous pink-spotted scrunch who can chew up a man with one bite. It likes to eat 5 of them roasted for lunch and 18 for its supper at night. We may see a dragon, and nobody knows that we won't see a unicorn there. We may see a terrible monster with toes growing out of the tufts of his hair. We may see the sweet little bitty bright hen, so playful, so kind and well-bred, and such beautiful eggs, you just boil them and then they explode and they blow off your head. A new rhinoceros surely you'll see, and that enormous and horrible gnat, who's sitting when it stings you goes in at the knee and comes out through the top of your hat. We may even get lost and be frozen by frost. We may die in an earthquake or tremor. Or nastier still, we may even be tossed on the horns of a furious dilemma. But who cares? Let us go from this horrible hill. Let us roll, let us bowl, let us plunge. Let's go rolling and bowling and spinning until we're away from Aunt Spiker and Sponge. 1 second later, slowly, insidiously, almost gently, the great peach started to lean forward and steal into motion. The whole room began to tilt over, and all the furniture went sliding across the floor and crashed against the far wall. So did James and the ladybug and the old green grasshopper and Miss Spider and the earthworm, also the centipede, who had just come slithering quickly down the wall. That is where chapter 14 ends today. So it sounds like even though we thought this adventure was kind of already on its way, the real adventure is now beginning. Don't forget to comment below what you think the vocabulary word marvelous means. And don't forget also to comment below to tell me what happened to the peach in the morning and who made it happen. What happened to the peach and who made it happen? I can't wait to read your responses. I can't wait to knock off some tally marks for some of you to write you a letter home. And I look forward to reading what happens tomorrow. Bye, guys.